Hello everyone, Tactically here, and today we have a really fun battle from last week's Orktober Greenskin tournament where players have to play as some kind of Greenskin subfaction with special rules imposed on them. For the green side here, played by yours truly, Grom the Paunch leading his one-down fleet of various vehicles, a bunch of pump wagons and chariots. I do have to bring enough boys on wheels for at least 4,000 gold worth of funds, so we are here with a ton of pump wagons, one of them the spore sploders with their explosive spores, and then two more Orktober chariots, a bunch of goblin wolf chariots, and the rest of the army is just sheer mobility. Forest goblin spider riders with Orktober Biggins supporting them, forest goblin spider rider archers, and the Morgrove's Mangy marauders in case I have to shoot some armored monsters, and then a bunch of Orktober Biggins on the right side as well. They are accompanied by Grom the Paunch himself, with the Great Hunt is here for that leadership and melee attack boost, and more importantly language of the boys, providing the immune to psychology, which will be very helpful against my opponent's Azak subfaction. Other than that, spell support with the Giant River Troll hack here with Spirit Leech and also Fate of Buna plus Mither for that slow effect. On the other side of the battlefield, my opponent Rusto, going with the Azak subfaction, their special rule is to bring at least 2 monsters of flesh and blood, not counting in the characters. So they need to bring Feral Wyvern, a Ragnarok Spider, or Giant, and they did bring the Spider and the Wyvern here, providing some pretty nice anti-launch damage and also speed in the sky to chase down my mobility. Basically, I've got no infantry whatsoever, so the speed of the Wyvern will come in quite handy. Leading the army, Azak the Slaughter himself with Spirit Leech and Doom and Darkness for the leadership bomb. Hopefully, my immune to psychology with Grom's language of the boys will counteract the terror from all these monsters and the Doom and Darkness leadership debuff. For the rest of the army here, a front line of Orc Boys, second line of Orc Air Boys, and a third line of Orktober Biggins for their mass speed and anti-armor, anti-lodge attacks to pin down my chariot. That's it for the army builds, and now let's get the battle started. It is the month of October, the month of the War, and praise Gork and Mork, the battle has begun. Both armies are rushing forward, though we do have some preliminary skirmishing action. The Mangy Marauders and the Spider Rider Archers are trying to get a shot onto the Ragnarok Spider, but Rusto very wisely pulling them back before they take too much damage from the Spider Riders and Mangy Marauders' firepower. While firing back with their own air boys here, we'll be repelling my skirmishing forces, forcing all of them to move back, including these Goblin Wolf Chariots who do have their own missile attacks. The double Wyverns are circling around in the skies, trying to identify weakness in my army. The Feral Wyvern diving down onto my Orktober Biggins, trying to pin them down in melee. Very ambitious decision, as it is now pinned down by the countercharge of the Orktober Biggins. My opponent will be countercharging my countercharge with Orktober Boys and regular Boar Boys plus Azak the Slaughter here, charging into the rear of the Orktober Biggins, doing some nice damage on impact with all these countercharges. I'll be countering with my own Logie Bogie Spore Sploders, countercharge, while the Orktober Biggins here are piling in as well. A lot of investments are dumped into this one single engagement here, as the Ragnarok Spider is also in, munching on these bacon cavalry. However, Azak the Slaughter is stuck on the ground tightly by all these anti-large AP cavalry. I'll be throwing in even more resources with the Orktober Chariots, trying to pin down Azak the Slaughter on the ground, shooting him with my Goblin Wolf Chariots and beating him up with all these anti-large armor-piercing cavalry, and Grom the Paunch himself doing some pretty nice damage. Unfortunately for me though, the leadership bomb of Doom and Darkness forcing back my Orktober Biggins, but the Logie Bogie Spore Sploders are still in the fight, all thanks to the immune to psychology of the language of the boys, keeping them from being terror-routed away by the Spider, while all the time pinning down Azak the Slaughter in the fight here, and he is taking way too much damage for an initial engagement like that. He is now down to less than a quarter of his health, almost dead and already routing right after the 2-minute mark. But Grom also paying a dear price, as the red-green skins were buffed up by a massive war, especially the Ragnarok Spider. So Grom, a big fat juicy goblin, ripe for the picking for the Ragnarok Spider. He is quickly pulling out of the engagement, trying to charge into some Orc Air Boys instead and get away from the Ragnarok's pursuit. Azak trying to get away, but one last Spirit Leech from the Giant River Troll hack, and that shall be the end of the Slaughter being slaughtered. How ironic indeed. Now with most of my attention going to the right flank big melee fight, my left flank is doing much worse. My Spore Exploder exploded in the melee fight, while my War Chariots, both of them, are pretty much down for the count. So not a lot of successful chariot plays so far. The Orc War begins here, and the first Goblin Spider Riders fighting shoulder to shoulder, being surrounded by Orc Boys and Orc Boar Boys here, taking more and more damage, but they are fighting strong. Their leadership is wavering, so let's see how long they can hold in there. Grom is in the fight against the big spider. Thankfully, he does have some support from the Orc Warrior Begins with the language of the boys, and the Great Un is here, boosting their melee stats and leadership. These Orc Warrior Begins, despite how beleaguered they are still putting up a pretty good fight with their anti-large armor piercing, hacking away at the HP of the Ragnarok Spider. I'm throwing in the Goblin Wolf Chariots into combat, breaking the backs of these Orc Warrior Begins and Orc Boys here with a rear charge. Now they are moving on to different targets like these Orc Air Boys here, who are prime targets at whittling down my remaining cavalry with their firepower. Thankfully, they're not very accurate with their missiles, so I still have some leverage in terms of the mobility. Just circling around, cycle charging. They are indeed pretty decent melee combatants, so even with my melee attacks, I can't really effectively put them down, while they can do some pretty good damage to our Morgros Magic Marauders if they get in range, so I do have to be careful with my skirmishing cavalry. Now over here, Grom the Paunch has been routed off by the Ragnarok Spider here. Without the immune to psychology from the language of the boys, the Orc Warrior Begins will be forced into a terror rout, freeing up the Ragnarok Spider, and it will be returning to the main fight, reinforcing the rest of the red Orc unit soon. Now over here, Goblin Wolf Chariots got stuck in a bunch of Orc Air Boys and got dragged down in melee combat pretty efficiently. While I do have some returning Orc Warrior Begins who can help me harass these archer lines, though the Manju Marauders sitting in front of these Orc Air Boys for a little too long, taking roughly half their hit points as damage from those firepower. And the back there, some Orc Boys are chasing after my Spider Riders but got way out of position. They're isolated, so I will be charging them down with the Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers there, using their overwhelming numbers and very much full hit points on both units. Actually taking no damage in return in this rear charge as well, basically getting a free pick. Now back to the main fight here, let's go into a bit of fast forward as we are going into a bit of marching phase. The Giant River Troll trying to run for her life, but unfortunately being surrounded by Orc Warrior Begins and being caught up by the Ragnarok Spider. She will be going down after one last Spirit Leech on the Spider. My regrouped units of First Goblin, Spider Riders, and Orc Warrior Begins are harassing the Orc Air Boys, while the Wolf Chariots alongside Grom managed to break apart these beleaguered Orc Warrior Begins, alongside with some help of my own Orc Warrior Begins, who are also very beleaguered. They are now switching targets, ramming into these Orc Boys, who are not exactly the healthiest, and that means they're also more prone to rout, with the missile fire shooting in, applying the under missile fire leadership debuff of -5, combined with the Lord Death debuff. That was just enough to break these Orc Boys from melee combat, sending them onto a rout once again. Now Grom the Paunch once again challenging the Ragnarok Spider into a melee fight, but quickly realizing that was not a good idea and quickly bailing himself out of there. The Goblin Wolf Chariots will be staying in the fight against the Orc Boys for a little bit longer, trying to chase them down as I throw in more cavalry into the mix, running down the tattered Orc Warrior Begins. And because I do have some missiles shooting at the Ragnarok Spider, the AP fire from the Manji Marauders whittling away at the remaining health of the Ragnarok Spider, the Spider decided to buckle and run, as Grom the Paunch is getting healthier and healthier by the second thanks to his regeneration ability. With everything routed in the melee department of the Red Greenskin Army, I am free to charge those Orc Air Boys at the back there, using the rest of my remaining cavalry here, all these very well preserved Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers swarming the Orc Air Boys, who are now down to roughly half health, not lasting long in melee combat, as Grom the Paunch rolling through their ranks with his chariot. Army losses hit, and the victory belongs to this big fat goblin boy. GG to my opponent Rusto, and that was a very fun battle indeed. For the army performances here, the Orc Boar begins thanks to the language of the boys, and the Great Un is here from Grom the Paunch. The melee attack and leadership boost allows them to stay in the combat much longer than they usually are, and dragging down those massive scary monsters with their anti-large armor piercing. Although unfortunately this one getting surrounded and swarmed by a sheer number of Orc Boys and Boar Boys, didn't do that much damage. Rum the Punch himself didn't do that much damage either, but he did tank a lot of damage, almost dying in the process, but thankfully his regeneration kept him alive. The Giant River Troll hack did some really nice Spirit Leeches against single entities, including slaying Azek in the end. The rest of the mobility, one Orktober Chariots did pretty fine actually, almost earning back their cost, and actually got a chevron and a lot of kills, but the other not so much. The Spider Rider archers were very key in staying alive till the end and running down the beleaguered Orc Airboys, while the Goblin Wolf Chariots did a surprisingly good job throughout battle and actually earned back their own costs as well. I was never expecting that actually. Manji Marauders very nice with their AP fire as always, while the pump wagons, well, they didn't really pump out much value. As for Rusto's Azek army, Azek himself didn't do that much damage since he died pretty early in the game, so not much value from him, while the other two monsters, the Furrow Wyvern didn't do much, but the Ragnarok Spider basically carried the game on its back, just not quite able to hold on into the late game due to the Lord Death debuff and the beleaguered forces of the Greenskins of Azek's army here. The rest of Azek's army, the Orc Boys didn't do that much damage as they just didn't really have a good engagement against my mobility units, while the Orc Airboys did some pretty fine job shooting up my skirmishing cavalry, specifically the Manji Marauders, but just not quite able to carry the game on their own. Our Boba Biggins traded really well into pretty much my purely large unit model only army and got some really good value, just that the Orc Boys was not exactly great in this scenario due to the lack of anti-large. And yeah, that's it for today's battle. I hope you all enjoyed this multiplayer tournament battle from last week's Greenskin tournament. And if you want to see more Total Warhammer multiplayer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich signing out.